collections by giving it to the Huguenot Society. And when the Huguenot Society was starting to make some changes in how they thought Locust Lawn and the Terwilliger House were going to be preserved or managed, we felt very much that it was our responsibility to make sure that Miss Young's wishes, which were that the big house and this property would be preserved for the public, would in fact continue on. And so in October of last year, we took over ownership of the property, what's left of the property here at Locust Lawn and the Terwilliger House. The buildings on this side of the road, the Terwilliger House, and also the property across the road, which is often called the Little Wings Bird Sanctuary, was all included in that transfer. Locust Grove is an organization that's primarily focused on historic preservation and environmental conservation. And so our goal with these buildings is to keep them in good condition and keep them open to the public. And so there won't be any changes to the way that the house has been treated over the past years. We're not building condos or converting it into a restaurant or anything along those lines. So hopefully you'll feel secure in its ownership. You might have noticed we've begun taking care of what has really become a very large backlog of deferred maintenance. We're doing some interior repainting in the house this year. You'll see by the end of this year, the entire first floor, inside and outside, will be repainted and hopefully good for another 10 or 15 years without peeling paint and looking a little bit more polished. And we're also working on the big house at Locust Lawn as well. There's structural repairs going on in the basement and at the roof level, and we'll be doing interior work on plaster conservation on the upper floors. Neither of the houses are open this year for tours. With all the work that's going on in the property, we didn't want to deal with having to schedule or reschedule tours around conservation work or around construction work. So the houses are shut this year. They'll be reopening for tours next year once the work is done and things are looking a little bit more polished. For those of you that have had the chance to visit the Locust Grove estate, we have a fairly high standard for maintenance and presentation of properties that we very much want these properties to fit in with. And frankly, with the peeling paint and sagging bits, this place wasn't really quite up to par for us. And so with work being done finished throughout this year, we'll be in much better shape next year to present the houses to the public. One of the things that we very much want to address in our interpretation and our presentation of this house is the story of preservation, how the Terwilliger family got together in the 1970s, raised the money to buy the house, and as far as I understand, often with their own hands and fingernails and paintbrushes, put everything back together again. And so I'm hoping that those of you that have early photographs of yourselves, of your parents and spouses working on this house in particular, that you can, I've run out of cards, but I'll get more out of my card, that you can either send them to me, we'll copy them and send the originals back to you, or if you can send JPEG or electronic versions of them. We're going to be putting together a series of panels that talk very much about the preservation of this property. The story of preservation is something that we address very much at Locust Grove, and we're addressing more at Locust Lawn and at the Terwilliger House. And so we need those things from all of you who are the ones that have them in order to put it together. I think it's probably not so interesting to hear me rattle on endlessly, so if you have questions, I'd be happy to answer questions as you go along at this point in time. Questions from anybody? Yes, ma'am.
The house is empty.
Yes. Sorry.
No, so what if you are planning to reopen next year?
The house was transferred to us without collections. The furnishings for the house were the property of the Huguenot Society and were not included in the transfer of real estate and the endowment funds that came with the house. Since we don't have original furnishings for the house, our presentation of the house is, for probably at least the next 5 years, going to be as an empty structure. We're going to talk very much about architecture, about the evolution of the structure of the house itself without furnishings, and very much about the story of the Terwilliger family coming together to preserve the house. And so that's why I'm hunting for photographs from all of you, so we can create interpretive panels for the interior of the house. The house at Locust Lawn and at Locust Grove feature 100% original family collections. Unfortunately, the Terwilliger House doesn't have that great collection space to go on with, and we don't have original furnishings for the building. And so we're going to be dealing with the presentation of the house through interpretive panels, since we don't have collections for the house.
Are you seeking?
We are probably not seeking collections, since we don't think there's anything that was original to the house here. If there are pieces with very strong Terwilliger family connections, we would review those. What we primarily collect are pieces with a very strong family history or a very strong history of use in the particular house. And our collection guidelines are drawn very narrowly. So I should say we're not a genealogical organization, and so we don't collect genealogical material or research material. But if there are pieces that you know of that are strongly connected with the house, that would be something that we would be interested in acquiring.
But not just historical Terwilliger pieces.
Probably not. I guess that's the best way to put it. No, that's a very good question.
Yeah.
What we're primarily interested in is in this house in particular, and not in the greater history and genealogy of the Terwilliger family. Preservation of this particular house is going to be what our goal is. Like I said, there is always room for flexibility. For example, paintings of this house, which maybe weren't used in this house but are of the house, would be something that we would be interested in. And the photographs and artifacts from the restoration of this house by the Terwilliger family in the 1970s would be something that we would be particularly interested in as well. But likely not pieces that were used at other Terwilliger family houses, but not at this house, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well,
Sometimes I hear myself talking and I don't hear it. It's myself making sense.
When it goes out to the Terwilliger public, when we started this organization in 1974, it was there was a different thrust to it, and we were excited to receive different things, and there is a list someplace of all the different things that we received. So you're interested more in pictures?
Probably photographs and in the structure of the house itself, exactly. Not in furniture that was probably not used at this house.
What about those, in the far room back there, there used to be a case. There was a case, remember, that had artifacts in it, and we had a thing where you could see how the house was structured. I didn't see that was still exposed.
Yeah, none of that was transferred with the house, and we're having structural problems with the plaster continuing to fall off the wall in the section where the plaster wall was exposed, so we've closed all that up. We're going to deal with all that through photographs and not through a crumbling plaster wall that's difficult to manage, unfortunately.
Okay.
A lot of what we're going to be planning on doing in the house is making sure that it's secure and stable for the future as well. So with interior painting work, for this first phase, which is, as with lawn mowing, so relatively easy to do and gives us a big bang for the initial investment in time, but we're also looking at substantial future costs that are going to have to be incurred to keep this house standing. A lot of pointing issues are coming up with the stone, both at the basement level and outside the house, and eventually we're going to have to deal with the roof issues as well. And so they keep coming out, these roof issues. They just tend to do that. We think we have about 10 more years on this roof, but shortly it's going to have to be addressed.
So much of it is, we've done it, and we keep doing it, right?
Yeah, that's always the difficulty with roofs in particular, is you're never done.
Well, when we got the house, the porch, remember the porch?
This is like on the floor. So I should say our goal is primarily structural, making sure the house is stable and secure and usable for the public and is presented effectively. That's what it's going to put it all. But really, furnishings that are not from the house would probably not be something that we would be interested in doing. We're always happy to review donations though, and our collections committee has wide latitude if something is particularly important to the way that we're going to interpret the house to make exceptions, but it doesn't happen often, I should say. So if you have something that you're interested in donating, you can always email me photographs or email me what you have. I can give you a sense of it if it would be something that they'd be interested in.
So Ken, you mentioned a collections policy. Is that something that you could share with us?
Absolutely.
So that we can get a better sense of what you're really looking for to support
the Locust Grove Collections policy, along with all of our management documents, is public information, and I'm very happy to share that with you. It's right now, it's a very limited document, frankly. When Locust Grove takes over an artifact or a building to manage, make a commitment to preserving it in good condition in perpetuity. And so we're very careful to not take things that we won't be able to take care of, and to only take as many things as we'll be able to say that forever you'll be able to come here, you'll be able to look at it, and we're going to take good care of it. And as you know, the cost of managing buildings and artifact collections is enormous, and we don't want to take on things that we can't manage, frankly. So that's what our collections policy sort of like boils down to. But I'm happy I can email it to you or to anybody that's interested in it so you can take a look at it. No problem. That's a good question. Any other questions? Yes,
We had discussed a long time ago about you possibly renting out this house for meetings, and so we can discuss that.
Yeah, since the house is going to be empty, it's also going to be usable for parties and meetings and other events, not just tours. What we have found at Locust Grove is that tourism itself is not, in the end, going to raise enough money to pay the overhead and operating costs for historic buildings. And so we at Locust Grove have tried to find alternate revenue sources to support the preservation of buildings and make sure that they're still available for the public to see. At Locust Grove, we have rental space for weddings and events. This house is not really usable for weddings, frankly. The rooms are small, the interiors are fairly fragile. So this space, I think, will be mostly used for the porches and the outside for meetings and events after museum hours. At Locust Grove, we run as a museum from 9 to 5 every day, and then in the evenings when the museum is closed is when we can make additional money to help keep the buildings up. Everything from utility bills to taxes to insurance are increasing exponentially, and finding additional revenue sources to offset costs is key to keeping all these places going, again, in perpetuity. So that's one thing that we'll be looking at. So if you're getting married, you want to have a party here, give me a call. For you guys, of course, there's no charge, but yes, sir.
As a historical building, can you get that status where you get this as a tax exempt, this building for?
It's a very good question. The property taxes in the town of Gardner are waived on these properties. The taxes that we would end up paying here are primarily payroll and other service taxes like that we're not exempt for. So that's a good question. Sorry, that's a general statement and not a particular one for the property taxes on this structure.
I can see, I mean, these rooms might be small, but there could be certain kinds of parties that could be held in here, but you said it was too fragile.
What we want to make sure is that a wedding with red wine getting spilled on the floor and food getting spilled on the floor and champagne corks going off doesn't negatively impact the interior. And in this house, the interiors are, I guess maybe fragile isn't the right way, but easily spoiled is the best way to put it. And so we don't want to host an event that causes, someone to have strawberries ground into the floor or shrimp tails up the fireplace or something along those lines, which is unfortunately all things we have seen with parties at Locust Grove. And so finding a way to both host events that don't cause greater damage to the structure with these, great, fabulous, old, uneven floorboards. They're hard to manage, hard to keep clean, especially with the heavy use of a party. So looking at the outside spaces where we can hose off the porch, power wash it, and get rid of any problems is probably going to be the easier space for this building. We'd open the interior for walkthroughs, but not for seated dinners, for example. It sort of depends on who the party is, too. Big raucous wedding, maybe not so much. Nice Terwilliger family party, probably a little bit more. People that we know aren't going to wreck the building or shove shrimp tails up into the fireplace are probably the better place to go. Anyone else with questions?
So is there any possibility, is it Carol Ann, you're painting, is there any possibility, or are there any further negotiations, any further thoughts, anything happening on a particular item that they took that was not transferred?
What we are no longer in negotiations with the Huguenot Society. We've closed all of our negotiations out. The ownership of remaining collections items goes with the Huguenot Society. They would have to deaccession any artifacts and transfer them to us.
So what does that mean, deaccession?
It means that they have to formally remove them from their collections, which is a complicated process. New York State regulates very carefully the ownership of artifacts that are donated to museums to make sure that they're treated appropriately and aren't callously sold or bartered for inappropriate uses. And so it's difficult for museums to remove artifacts from their collection. Things that are of particular interest to the house, we would consider borrowing from them. Right now the house is not in a stable enough environment to safely house artifacts, in our opinion. The temperature and humidity controls in this house are completely unregulated. There are mold issues and rodent issues, which would cost thousands and thousands of dollars to deal with. So frankly, we would be unlikely to take artifacts at this point, knowing that we don't have ample space to either exhibit them in this house safely. We don't want to take
You
something.
don't have an attic that they can be put in until.
We have some small storage space at Locust Grove, but it's very, very limited. The Young Family's collection is the bulk of the collection at Locust Grove. It's about 20,000 pieces. It's a very large collection and takes up a lot of space, and is also paid for by the Young Family's endowment funds, which was their great gift to Locust Grove. We're always open to options. I don't want to say absolutely no to everything, but also our ultimate goal is that we will take care of in perpetuity, perfectly, anything that we're given, and we take things very carefully because of that. We don't want to say we're going to take something and then have it be moldy when you come the next time, or have it be falling apart the next time you come. That's our ultimate goal when we say we'll take anything on. So it's unlikely that anything would be transferred at this point from the Huguenot Society. It would be difficult for them to transfer artifacts, because that's the best way to put it.
I think that says your painting is a problem.
I know.
Yeah, so that's.
In terms of the Terwilligers being an active part of this house, are there things that we'd be permitted to take part in? For instance, that the sign out there needs to be repainted. That's not a historical thing that needs to be. Could we take that on as a project? You're going to open the houses for tours, maybe have a grand opening and ask. Maybe we can have a Terwilliger party too.
Grand reopening. Yes, there are a number of things.
Are there things like that we could be involved in?
Absolutely. We at Locust Grove rely very much on volunteers and donations to underwrite an enormous amount of our projects. At the Terwilliger House, you all can help in a number of ways. Easiest and least effort is always giving money. Money can always be designated to the Terwilliger House Fund, and will go into a designated fund for the house, either endowment funds or operating funds for maintenance. There's a small endowment that came with the property that the Terwilliger family members had raised and donated themselves. It's about, and I honestly don't remember exactly how much it is, somewhere between $90,000 and $100,000. It generates about $5,000 a year in income. Endowment funds for Locust Grove, and with the by the restriction of the donors, only the interest can be used from those endowment funds. The principal cannot be used in general for operations. And so you can either add to the endowment funds to create more funds for operations, or you can also volunteer. We have everything from gardening work to painting parties to huge reading parties that we can organize. At Locust Grove, often church groups and scout groups and community service groups come for half day, or we'll take you for a whole day if you want to, days of work days to do everything from painting fences to scrubbing the outside of buildings to weeding out gardens. And so if you have a church group or an organization that would like to do volunteer work, we can set you up with tools and projects to do here too. So everything from giving cash to giving time. If you have a particular project that you see that's interesting that you'd like to do, we're always happy to do so, to welcome something like that too. Replacement of signage is always an important one. This house is closed this summer. We'll be reopening the house with an initial party this fall once initial work is done on the main floor of the house, and then for tours next year. And so there'll also be an opportunity to come for guided tours and to see the finished project. We're sort of seeing the 30% project at this point. So I hope that helps answer it. You can always get in touch with me. Again, I'll circulate my card around when I have it. We're launching also a new website for the combined Locust Grove, Locust Lawn, and Terwilliger properties, probably in about 8 weeks right now. So you'll be able to go on there to see more updates about opening status, upcoming projects, and upcoming events at the property too. Yes, sir.
Ken, when you do these different projects with different volunteers, do you notify the president that you're doing something?